What is going on, Sharp Football Analysis subscribers? Here we are, Thursday, week 4. It's hard to believe how fast this always goes by every year. We're already at a quarter of the way through your regular seasons this week. Hopefully, no one's at 0-3. Hopefully, everyone's got at least some wins and they're here fighting. It's crazy how much stuff's going to change still, too. We talk about this in 4 weeks from now, where everything's going to be. But I'll let some people, matriculate in here. See if we can get some questions here on the board. We talk a little bit about this game tonight. It's the best game we've had so far on paper coming in. At least with teams that are projected to be good over the course of the season. Actually, 2 that are intriguing that we believe are going to be in the hunt for the playoffs. And a lot of people are calling this a must-win game for the Eagles, but I mean that's not the truth. I mean, when you look at the Eagles' schedule, especially down the stretch, they've got a lot of winnable games. So if they can just hang around to like that last third, I mean, they can still make a push. With Giants, Redskins, they play Dolphins at the end of the year. There's a lot of winnable games still. This isn't just this is going to end their season. But from a fantasy stance, I mean, it's an intriguing matchup because I mean we have probably the first week. It's the first week I've had Aaron Rodgers ranked as a QB1. I've had him QB 15 or lower all 3 weeks. He's had terrible matchups. They want to play a little bit slower, a little more conservative. But this is the first week where I think at home against the Eagles secondary that's complete pass funnel defense. Once again, they're awesome against the run. They probably devote too much effort to stopping the run, to be honest, defensively, the way their scheme works. Kind of like how the Bucs are doing now this year, because they just don't have the back end personnel to slow down passing games. To have these guys play one-on-one coverage. So once again, they're 4th in running back yards allowed to start the year. They haven't allowed any individual running back to rush for 50 yards yet on the season. They were 4th in that category last year. So it's just going to be a game where we have to, be on for a bounce back for Devontae Adams. Marcus Valdes-Scantling is the clear number 2. Those 2 guys are set up for a big day. And then we talk about Rodgers himself. Being a QB1 finally this week. I mean, the Eagles are 25th in passing points allowed per game through 3 weeks. They're 31st in adjusted sack rate, so they're not getting to the quarterback at all. So I mean, it sets up well for Rodgers. Even on a Thursday night, I mean, on Thursday night he's been a top 10 quarterback in 4 of his past 5 on Thursday night. The only one was that Week 1 game against the Bears. But this is his best matchup on paper. So I mean, this is the first week I feel good about playing Rodgers. Obviously, I don't have Rodgers anywhere. But his first week, I feel really good about playing him if I did have him. On the other side, Wentz is getting Alshon back. He kind of struggled the past 2 weeks, as personnel deteriorated around the outside of him a little bit. They played that game with the Falcons where everyone basically got hurt in game. He only averaged just 5.4 yards per pass attempt in that game. Came back last week, 7.2 yards per pass attempt, still not up to where he was. But I mean, he's been salvaging these weeks in fantasy. He's still been a QB1 all 3 weeks. He's getting there. He's done a little bit of work in the running game. He had 30 rushing yards last week, a rushing touchdown the week before. He'll get Alshon back. I mean, he's a road dog against, a Packers defense that's been really good to start the year. But this is their biggest test so far. I mean, faced Kirk Cousins was the best quarterback they faced. They had Mitchell Trubisky in the opener. They had Flacco last week. I mean, so they'll be tested a little bit, from Wentz. We need to see the Eagles adjust and, open things up a little bit. I retweeted a Ben Baldwin tweet earlier that showed just how conservative they've been on first and second down running the football in neutral game script. At the bottom of the league, the Eagles are. They need to open things up, and pass the ball more on the early downs, especially to their, use their backs out of the backfield in this game, because the Packers, the one area where they've been getting beat is giving up chunk yardage to running backs out of the backfield. So, hopefully we see Miles Sanders build on, his strong receiving game off that one long catch last week. And he's using the passing game a little bit more. Darren Sproles still ran more pass routes than him last week. But yes, I mean, we're looking at Wentz kind of like, as the guy, he's like the, buy the syrup instead of the pancakes guy. He's just that, I think Wentz will still get there. He'll be a fringe QB1. The rest of the pieces outside of Ertz are pretty questionable. Now that Alshon's coming back, we just can't pencil in Aguilar for this, huge target rate, even though he'll be, probably number 2 or 3 in targets in this game. And then I would say the ancillary guy would be Mac Hollins over Arcega-Whiteside. But we're not probably going that far down the rabbit hole this week in that game. And then Aaron Jones, probably like a hit upon. I mean, just not an objectively strong bet tonight to do anything. Kind of similar to week 1. Even worse, though, is that he's coming off with season-low snaps. Jamal Jamal Williams actually played more snaps than him last week. He got kind of dinged up in that game as well. So, I mean, it's a game where I have Aaron Jones basically just like on the cusp of like a fringe RB2 in that game tonight. So, I mean, that's kind of what we're looking at tonight. Basically, Packers wide receivers, Aaron Rodgers, Wentz, Ertz, as like the guys I feel really good about starting. Everyone else has kind of got a question mark. So, I mean, I hit some of these questions. If they come back to circle around to that game, we'll go back to it. But I'll let some people come in here always for those first few minutes. Michael's asking, does my Marquise Brown ranking assume Greedy and Ward will play this week? Both missed practice today again. So, I mean, we'll know tomorrow. Remember, we always talk about Friday is basically a litmus test. If you don't practice on Friday, you're probably not going to play. And if you do practice, it means you probably will go. So we'll know more tomorrow. But, I mean, I'm not really worried about either of those guys as it pertains to Marquise Brown and how Marquise Brown gets his targets, the types of targets he gets. I mean, you're going to have games like last week where he had the 2 for 49, and the types of targets he gets, they're highly variant. Like, they're gonna have a lot of variance. And Lamar didn't play his best game last week. He was very erratic. They left a lot of yards on the field, but he still had 21% of the targets. Still had a bunch of monster targets downfield. So, I mean, you're going to get those every week. He's their lead wide receiver. They throw to him, the tight ends. Mark Andrews also didn't practice again for the second straight day, so we'll have to monitor him tomorrow. But I'm not really worried about either, Denzel Ward and Greedy Williams as guys that I'm circling from the cornerback pool as like I'm avoiding wide receivers. I talked a little bit about this on Twitter with a couple people today too. So we're talking about Robbie Anderson. Just cornerback wide receiver matchups in general, we lose a lot of context. There are very few cornerbacks we're actually avoiding for fantasy. Like, we're not going to play a guy because he's going against this specific cornerback. It's very rare. Like, it'll go into the projection and the expectations of a player, but there are very few cornerbacks where we say we're going to outright avoid this receiver, because when you talk about cornerbacks shadowing wide receivers, it very rarely happens. Very rarely is one guy on another player for 100% of his routes. Only a couple guys do that in the league. So then a lot of times you see like this guy's going to be across from this cornerback, you're not seeing the percentage rates of this. So you might have like Amari Cooper sees Xavier Howard for 70% of his routes. He's got 30% of his routes against everyone else, and he got over on Xavier Howard last week anyways. We just lose a lot of context. I think that they get overweighted sometimes into the analysis, and a little fear put in, unnecessary fear, because wide receivers are always going to run hot and cold on needing just a play or two to hit anyways. So there are very few cornerbacks that I actually have on my list of I'm going to outright avoid no matter who's on them. And then otherwise it just gets cooked into the analysis based on which receiver and what type of that receiver is and who he's going up against and how that factors into the projection, whether he's going to be limited or be like a shutdown guy. Obviously, if it's a guy like Devontae Parker going against Chris Harris, yeah, I'm going to fade that. He can't, he's going to get over on him, but we just ding the other guys and they go up against those types of players. So, I mean, I don't have Greedy Williams, who's played, all of 2 career games, and then Denzel Ward, who's missed a plethora of time, is on guys that I'm outright avoiding but for wide receiver plays this time, especially a guy that gets the types of targets that Marquise Brown gets. So, I mean, I have Marquise Brown as a wide receiver too with upside. He's probably going to be there most of the times this year. So, I mean, yeah, that's where we are with that. So, Parker is asking MVS or DJ Moore. I have MVS higher this week. I just a few spots higher. I think I have DJ Moore at wide receiver 30 and MVS, sitting around, I think, wide receiver 28 in that area. Let me just confirm you, but I know that I have him higher. Yeah, wide receiver 27 and DJ Moore at 31. I think when you look at Kyle Allen last week, and we'll see, I think we're just going to see that target distribution for Carolina kind of remain like flat or oscillate week to week. I think one guy is going to get just jammed with the targets. I think we'll see Samuel be 1 week like it was last week, Olsen, or DJ Moore is kind of the odd man out in targets. Only had 2 targets. He housed one for 50 yards, and we got that tud. But, we're going to see it kind of float around a little bit. So I think instead of him being like a wide receiver 2+ now with Kyle Allen, he's going to be a wide receiver 3+. That's where I'm at. I just like MVS's matchup and comparable targets this week for the edge for MVS. Adams got Aaron Jones, LaShawn McCoy, or Devin Singletary, half-point PPR. Devin Singletary did practice today. Looks like he's going to be on track. I still have him as just a flex play plus because we talked about it from week 1 going into week 2 with Devin Singletary, is that he got all his snaps, when they were just in sub packages. They were down 16-0. And then he played, and we were worried about him coming back the next week against the Giants, and how much was Gore going to play a neutral script. And Singletary had a rushing touchdown, but Gore was still involved heavily in neutral game script. So I think we're still going to see that a little bit. It does set up better for Devin Singletary. The longest run the Patriots have allowed all season is 9 yards. Not a broken play, not a QB scramble, anything. 9 yards is it. Like, that's the longest they allowed. So I think that Gore, it's a objectively bad game for Gore, but I still have Singletary as just a flex play plus. LaShawn McCoy practiced today. And Damian Williams didn't. I would have LaShawn McCoy ahead of Aaron Jones this week, when we recalibrate in rankings. I might have actually had him ahead anyways, but LaShawn McCoy, now that we've seen him practice, I already had him one spot higher anyways, but now that we've seen him practice and be good to go on a Wednesday, he'll move up a few spots because he was still in control of the backfield ahead of Darrell Williams until he re-aggravated that ankle. And then Darrell Williams, came and cleaned up in the second half of that game. So, I like Darrell Williams as well as the number 2 guy, but I have McCoy a little bit higher. He had the 2 touchdowns, got the money touches, which is what we always love. And then I still have Darrell Williams as a flex play as well if you did pick him up. Because it looks like Damian Williams is definitely trending towards not playing again. And Darwin Thompson played 5 snaps. We kind of had some caution about Darwin. Darwin last week, just take a lot of questions about Darwin and playing him, and we weren't there last week, and we saw why. But I would hold off. I would play Shady over Aaron Jones. Like I said, I just don't think it's a good game for Aaron. I think you need a touchdown from Aaron Jones. It's a similar spot to what we had on that Thursday night to open the season. So what we got with Matt? Excuse me. Matt's got pick 2: McCole, Dorsett, Deontay Johnson, John Ross, or Jordan Howard. A lot of flexes and a half PPR. So definitely McCole Hardman's in there just for the upside and, attachment to, Patrick Mahomes in his first indoor game of his NFL career. We don't really need to like he doesn't need more juice, Patrick Mahomes. And he's a guy that already has 3 or more passing touchdowns in 7 straight road games. We don't need to come up with splits to make him even better. But we definitely want attachment to him while it's going. Obviously, you're chasing a splash play still, but he has the better matchup and the best outlook of those guys. And then out of the other options, I think John Ross is the play just for volume and snaps. Dorsett's going to be on the field, but again, tougher matchup. Another guy you're chasing a touchdown from. The Bills are really good, and they were really good against the pass last year. They're a team that their schedule is similar to the Patriots. They've had a really soft run the opening 3 games, but we know that they're good. And the personnel, that's the strength of their team, is the secondary. And Tom Brady was very bad in both games that they played last year. He was the QB 15 or lower in both of those games. Dorsett he has scored a touchdown in 5 of his past 7 games going back to last year. So, Brady and him have a little thing going. I just think that there's more upside in that, Steelers-Bengals game for a little more shootout potential. If Mason Rudolph could just be a little better and they can cash in their scoring opportunities because, they had 3 turnovers in the first quarter of that game. They had 5 turnovers in total and, just weren't able to cash in for touchdowns early in that game. So I think there's just a little more upside, in a guy like Ross, where Dorsett, you're just hoping for a touchdown. And then Deontay Johnson in that same game, just to touch upon him, just not to skip over him. He played fewer snaps than James Washington. He was still the guy working in and as a third wide receiver. So, it's just tough to bank on that one long play that he had for that touchdown. You want to see a little more consistency, and I don't know how many guys were expecting Mason Rudolph to float every week at this point. Mason Rudolph's got to play a lot better. He was very shook in that game, very scary in that game. I think we were hoping that we were going to see a little more of that second half when he came in the second half against the Seattle game, and that just did not exist. He got a little bit comfortable towards the end of that game last week, but the Juju touchdown was all Juju. And then he hit Deontay Johnson on the blown coverage when Othello Witherspoon came out, and 2 plays later, Deontay Johnson smoked Jason Verrett for that touchdown. Sean's got Chris Godwin, Calvin Ridley, and MVS back to back in my rankings. Who is the highest ceiling this week. Highest ceiling is good is Ridley for highest ceiling. Like if there's just like pure upside, he also is the guy I would say easily has the lowest floor though too. He's been a lot better at home. Matt Ryan has his home splits are sensational, and usually when the quarterback pops, it's so when quarterbacks have like a good game, it's typically with the wide receiver one. But when they pop for these big games, it's typically an ancillary receiver goes nuts to the wide receiver two or the tight end, and that's usually what's happened in these Matt Ryan games at home. Calvin Ridley splits at home are really much better too. So, I mean, he's a guy that has a high ceiling, but we saw last week he also has a low floor. He averages 10.3 yards per target in his career at home, 8 yards flat per target on the road, Calvin Ridley. I think MVS is the safest guy now that Chris Godwin also hasn't practiced either the past 2 days. So, I mean, if you don't want to if you want to hold out for Ridley in the ceiling, you have a pivot if Godwin doesn't play. But I mean, if you want to take a shot on MVS's floor plus the matchup, I mean, he probably is the safest of the 3 plays, given what we know about Godwin at this point. And the Rams in general, how they've shut down wide receiver play. And this goes back to last year when they had Talib. Their splits when Talib played versus wide receivers and not. And I had something in the week 1 worksheet about this. And it's just rolled over into this season. They just haven't given up any splash plays at all. They've allowed the fewest gains of 20-plus yards in the NFL so far. So, I mean, it's just not a game where I think Godwin has a lot of upside, and he's going to come in hurt as well. A game that I just objectively, I've moved him down already for the matchups. I mean, he'll probably move to just like fringe wide receiver 3 status, and we'll know more tomorrow if he practices or not. Adam's asking Diggs or Allen Robinson in half PPR. That is tough. Because it's an objectively bad matchup for both guys. A-Rob did nothing at all against Xavier Rhodes last year. In the one game he played against him. Diggs did have 2 good games against the Bears last year. In one game, it was like kind of a kind of jailbreaky. I don't know if you remember, the Bears scored like they scored 1 or 2 defensive touchdowns in the first game, and like the last 2 drives of the game, Diggs just went like nuts. Like there was one drive, I think he caught 7 passes. For sure. And in that game, he finished with 13 catches for 126 yards. I think one drive in the fourth quarter, he caught 6 or 7 passes alone. And the second time they played with Kevin Stefanski, he had 8 catches for 47 yards, kind of what he's been doing with a touchdown. The volume should be a little bit higher. They're dogs. We talked about this, continuously throughout the season now with these guys. When they're home favorites or favorites of any kind, we've got to really move those guys down in terms of volume. There's just it's gone on now for over the past 10 games and into the back half of last year. And Thielen as well. Thielen saved 2 games because he has touchdowns, and he had a rushing touchdown last week too. But he only had 5 targets and 3 catches last week. And just like I said, we can't expect Cousins to be good in this spot. But on the flip side, I mean, A-Rob. Is attached to Mitchell Trubisky and going against Xavier Rhodes. So, I mean, I think I probably just have a little more faith in Diggs. And we saw Paul Richardson and, Terry McLaurin still have decent games, on Monday night. I'm not high on Diggs by any means. I'm also just not high on Robinson. They're 32 and 34 in rankings. It's just one of those ones that I'm not high on either guy. Maybe I just, like I said, you feel a little bit better just based on what McLaurin and Richardson did in garbage time. It's a tough one, though. Michael's asking trade question about Brandon Cooks and Breida to get Mack. I mean, if you need so it's really just essentially Brandon Cooks for Marlon Mack. As long as you have a need at running back and you have wide receiver depth, like those types of trades are what you should be doing. You said you've got Julio, Lockett, Hollywood, DJ Moore, and Tate, plenty deep enough at the bench, and you're thin at running back. So yeah, those are types of trades you make. You take a strength of your team and you find a team that needs that strength, and you go on their roster and see if they have something that you need to fill your roster. That's how you make trades. That's how you successfully trade. Instead of making these trades where I call them musical chair trades, where you're trying to take Julio Jones and trade him for Devontae Adams or whatever, anything like that. That's the avenue you want to get on, and Breida is basically just an ancillary piece in that trade. It's essentially Brandon Cooks or Marlon Mack, which is completely fine, and it looks like it's a need for both teams. Justin Jackson or Miles Sanders and half PPR. I'm going to play Miles Sanders because I know he's going to get more. I can project the actual touches where Justin Jackson still takes a leap of faith. He played a season high 28 snaps last week, but only had 9 touches. We know he's going to probably get more touches against the Dolphins, but it's still guesswork. You still have to, I hate playing these backups in these situations where you have to just, you have to wait for the game to get to a certain game script for these guys to get off. It definitely worked out for Tony Pollard last week. But we saw the first week with Gus Edwards. It's not like he was tangible for fantasy. He got a bunch of touches, but it's not like he did anything for fantasy. So it's just tough. I think that Justin Jackson's a fine, a flex dart. I just have Sanders a little bit higher. I can count on him being involved a little bit more in the pass game. And you said the running backs are where the Packers have had the most trouble, defensively to start the season. I mean, like I said, I can tell myself the upside story of Justin Jackson. There's just a low floor also involved there. Let's see, Mac is in here. Like my tweet about Gordon coming back. Luckily, I dropped him last week and traded Fournette for Eckler. Oh, man. I'm sorry to hear that. I don't know why you dropped him, though. I don't know if you were in a bind or not. But that's a bummer. Kim, I would play Darrell Williams over Jamal Williams in the battle of the Williamses. Like I said, Jamal Williams did play more snaps than Aaron Jones last week, but the Eagles are just a complete pass funnel. I don't like play running backs against the Eagles, especially if it's going to be a timeshare running back. So I would hold off. I like Darrell Williams in a split a lot more in his matchup than I do Jamal Williams in his split. When I think about 2 running backs from the same game, in tournaments, yeah, it's tough. The correlation typically isn't there. It depends on what kind of guy it is. If it's a guy like McCaffrey or something, obviously you're not as worried about it. But like Jacobs and Mack definitely is something it's one I wouldn't lean on. Obviously, if Mack is crushing and they're controlling game script, we don't know how Jacobs is going to be involved. We've seen him not used in the passing game really at all to this point. So I mean, it's more of a leap of faith. So I mean, just the correlation isn't there for like a matchup like that. And then they're huge road dogs too, 7-point road dogs, and they've lost their past 7 games on the East Coast. So I mean, it's just a tough spot. And then you want to play the 2 Chargers together. So the 2 Chargers together is more of a GBP stack than it would be the 2 guys against each other, Jacobs and Max. So I mean, the 2 Chargers we find. You didn't see Allen Robinson at all on the wide receiver list. Is he that bad, or is it an oversight? Did I just miss him? Would I play him or take someone like Deontay Johnson off the wire? I mean, I would play him over a guy like Deontay Johnson. He is on there. I think he's he's around wide receiver 32. Yeah, Sean's got it afterwards. Wide receiver 32. Just kind of a wide receiver floor. But the targets have been there. We just see the attachment to Mitch. And I had a tweet earlier about the wide receiver expected points versus where they are now. And you see Allen Robinson, his expected points put him at wide receiver 20 with all the targets and where he's getting targets on the field, but he's actually the wide receiver 38 in PPR. And part of that is because he hasn't scored a touchdown. Also, part of that is because the quarterback he's attached to. When we talk about expected points for the types of targets guys are getting and guys underperforming, Allen Robinson's probably going to be a guy that is on there often because when you underperform, it's because you're not finding the end zone. And we got to count on Mitchell Trubisky to carry some of that touchdown water for Allen Robinson. So, I mean, Allen Robinson could be a guy that he's going to get 120 targets, but he might only be in the end zone 5 to 7 times on the season, which is going to hurt his overall outlook from expected points to what he's actually producing on the field. And then we talked about his, just matchup against Xavier Rhodes. A lot tougher spot for him this week. He's had one game higher than wide receiver 40, 3 for 7. He caught 3 of 7 targets with 39 yards in this matchup last year. Just kind of, like I said, a wide receiver 3 based on volume. Best teams for the eliminator this week. I mean, are you not going to use the Chargers? You don't want to burn that one. I mean, I'm treating eliminators as I'm going to have to make 3 decisions. 4 decisions. The 3 games, everyone plays the Dolphins a second time because when the Jets finally play them, they're going to have Darnold. And then the bye week that the Dolphins are on bye. So I'm not even going to get cute with it. I mean, it's a team that's objectively not trying to win games. They're significantly worse than every team that they play against. I'm just going to take the free square until I have to make decisions. Preston's asking PPR, Valdes Scantling or McCoy in the flex option. In full PPR, I would lean Scantling there just, for the wide receiver points. Why am I so low on DJ Shark? Well, one, we talk about it. He's going to be that guy this week going against Chris Harris on the outside. And then when you look at expected points in production, expected points have DJ Shark at the wide receiver 50 or wide receiver 48. He should be the wide receiver 48 based on the types of targets he's got. He's run hot because of what? Touchdown variance. He's found the end zone all three games. So, I mean, when those touchdowns, kind of dry up and when the matchup's tougher, that's the easier point to fade. We had this question on Sunday, a similar thing with John Ross, and I was suggesting not to play John Ross and why I had John Ross so low, because it was just a good week to circle for the regression to kind of come in. And I think that's where we are at DJ Shark this week. I think this is a good spot to really pinpoint that regression, as a road dog against a good secondary. They ain't getting any pressure. Denver's not getting any pressure on anyone, but I mean, they've been really good on the back end still against wide receivers, and he doesn't move inside enough. I actually think that it's a better game for D.D. Westbrook than it would be for Shark. It's just that if Shark's the better bet to get a touchdown, even though I don't think he'll get one this week. No chance you play Hockenson or Burton over OJ Howard, right? I mean, I think definitely not Burton. I'm definitely not playing Burton. I think that you can at least tell yourself based on the game between the Lions and the Chiefs versus the Buccaneers and the Rams, and that there's a lot more potential for back and forth. And then the way the Rams have defended the pass and specifically the way they've defended tight ends, that you can pivot and just chase a touchdown with Hockenson. The Chiefs are giving up, they're tied for the league lead in receptions allowed to tight ends. The Rams are allowing a league low 3.7 yards per target to opposing tight ends. So, I mean, I can at least tell myself I can chase a touchdown there. Definitely not Burton, though. I'm not playing Burton at any level. Watch Burton score a touchdown tonight. He's got 3 catches for 20 yards and a touchdown, or on Sunday. Wayne Gallman or Royce Freeman, or Miles Sanders. I have Gallman the highest of those guys. I mean, you're just talking about he's not going to have a split, not going to be a projected timeshare like the other two are. I know Wayne Gallman's kind of a gross play, a volume-based play, but I think I'm willing to give him at least another look. Because the Bucs have been awesome against the run so far. They've been another one of those teams. And you look at Todd Bowles' history, they've been really good against the run. All the defense he's had, except for the last 2 years with the Jets, when just they couldn't stop the run even because of game script. They just got ran on for game script purposes. But look at who they've played so far. So they had a half of Saquon, and Saquon had 8 carries for 10 yards before Gallman even came in. Wasn't doing anything. They shut down Christian McCaffrey the week before. And the 49ers backfield, they limited in week 1. And the 49ers have just steamrolled teams on the run the past 2 weeks. But they've held those teams to 106, the backfields alone, 160 yards rushing and 2.7 yards per carry the first 3 weeks. So I think teams are starting to catch on. And we saw the Giants just basically say, well, in game script as part of it, just say, we're not going to run the football anymore. We're just going to attack you at your weakest point. And I think we'll start seeing more and more teams do that. And this week definitely sets up as a week for the Rams. I mean, they're going to just live in 11 personnel and probably eat that secondary alive. And then you look at Goff's home road splits too. It definitely sets up a game for the Rams to just have a big shootout. But, Gallman's got a better matchup. He's a home favorite. I think the touches are still going to be there for him. And he's a guy that can catch the football. He had 34 receptions as a rookie. I don't know how many checkdowns he'll get with, Daniel Jones being the quarterback now, as opposed to Eli Manning. But I think that he's the better objective play out of those 3. Giants, Redskins, possible shootout. Liking Scary Terry. I mean, yeah, you should like Scary Terry every week. He popped up on the injury report, a little hamstring too. McLaurin did. So definitely keep an eye on that. Keenum practiced in full today. So, I mean, he's good. I think it's interesting that you would like McLaurin more if Keenum was benched. I think Keenum right now is the best thing for McLaurin because if you go to Haskins, I know a lot of people want to run the shower narrative with Haskins and McLaurin because they played together in college. But, is Haskins going to be a guy that can have these games where he can turn it over 5 times and still throw over 300 yards and get this junk script like, Keenum has done, 2 weeks in a row against the Cowboys and, against the Bears last week and produce these yards for these wide receivers? Or is it a game where they just get buried? I think there's a lot more unknown in that scenario. I actually think that Keenum right now is the best thing for McLaurin. And I feel better that he practiced today, and if he's going to go, I mean, it could be where it turns out there's no change over whatsoever. I definitely think McCoy would be the worst thing for him, and I saw they were splitting first team reps yesterday when Keenum didn't practice. I think Colt McCoy would probably be the worst thing, just given his dink and dunk, mentality. But I think Keenum and the way Keenum plays is the best thing for McLaurin, and eventually we're gonna get Haskins. He's going to play. But I think that my personal opinion is I think Keenum is the best thing for him right now. Yeah, you saw Corey Clement's back. I mean, it's not out of the realm of possibility they muddle this thing up more. Adam. I mean, we'll have to wait and see. It's definitely not outside of the realm of possibility with what the Eagles have done, historically with their backfield. You put a little fear in me there by bringing that up too, because who knows if that can happen. But I don't know for sure. Howard played pretty well last week. He got, he played the most he had played all year, and he got the touchdown. The bummer is with Miles Sanders now is why he can't now be like RB2 with upside, and now he's more of a flex play with upside, is because of Howard coming in and getting that goal line touch and converting it. If he's not going to have that role, that's a big hit. Ben is asking which 2.5 PPR, Hardman, MVS, or Miles Sanders. I would lean the 2 receivers there. And we've got Gallman or McLaurin in the flex. I would play McLaurin in the flex, just like I said, monitor his, his hamstring. But I want to play McLaurin. The Giants are allowing the most yards per target to wide receivers. They've been getting crushed by lead wide receivers too, wide receiver ones. So definitely look, follow, McLaurin's status. Tomorrow, see how he's practicing. I mean, because Janoris Jenkins has had a rough start to the season, and he's one of those guys too that he's one of those like faux shadow guys. Like he shadows, but doesn't shadow like for 100% of snaps. Like he'll pop up and have shadow coverage. Casey Hayward's another one of those guys. You saw it last week. DeAndre Hopkins didn't catch a pass in the coverage of Casey Hayward, but he still had a bunch of other targets elsewhere. And he didn't have a big game by any means, but it's one of those things I said, if he hits on some of those targets that come against those other guys, that game looks totally differently instead of saying, well, Casey Hayward locked him down and shut him down. Well, and that was the total case because he didn't run all of his routes against Casey Hayward. Carry-on and Diggs for Mack and Waller. Yeah, I mean, if you have a tight end need, I think that's fine. If you have a Scott, if you have a tight end need, I think Waller's safe, especially if it's full PPR. I want Darren Waller. That's where I really want him to have the juice. If it's standard or half, he takes a little bit of a step back. But if you have a tight end need, that's completely fine. I have no issues with that. Kim is in a deep dynasty league. Would you drop Callaway, David Moore, or Devin Smith to activate Danny Dimes? I think out of all of those guys, I think it would have to be, Devin Smith, just because, Gallup's going to be back, and that Gallup is in his role, and then obviously Cobb has got his role. I mean, it's just a lot for Devin Smith to overcome. He'll need another injury, where at least when you see the Seattle depth chart, you can say at least David Moore may be able to leapfrog Jerron Brown at some point. And then the Browns have been struggling. Rashard Higgins got hurt again at practice this week and hasn't played the last 2 weeks. Looks like he re-aggravated his knee. And they've been playing Ratley. So when Callaway comes off suspension, he might get another shot to come in and, be a weapon. It's a team that hasn't passed the ball well either. So, I mean, he could definitely be a guy that uncorks things for that offense a little bit. And Callaway played well the back half of last year as a rookie. So, I mean, I would lean Devin Smith there just for the reasons I said. It's just that he's a little bit buried. I was taught when I was taught when drafting cash game running backs to look for home teams favored by 7 more. Does that go out the window with Gurley against the Bucks? I mean, so it's a good spot for running backs and cash game running backs. So the way I play cash game running backs is, I do like home favorites, but I also look for guys that do both things. So you need to be involved in both components of the game, because if you get game script wrong, where is your window? It's why like a guy like Mark Ingram will always be a tournament play, something like, because if game script goes crazy, what happens to that player? you're in a world of hurt because he's not catching passes. And that's kind of where we are with Gurley. I mean, he's just not. I mean, four catches for 8 yards. The Rams have targeted running backs the lowest rate in the league, just 7%. They're the only team under 10%. And they were at 17% last year. So if Gurley's not catching passes, it's a problem. And then I talked about the Bucs D a little bit, how good they've been against good competition. You know, we're still in that small sample size phase where you say this team is 25th against the pass or they're 25th against receivers. But if you check out these worksheet articles, I'm trying to give you guys examples of why they have been bad. And if they're bad against good players, it's fine. You know, if there's teams like have been shutting down bad opponents, then you need to take that with a grain of salt and, you know, check things out. But the Bucs have been a team that have shut down good running backs so far and good running games. So, I mean, I take that into account a little bit. But, you know, 10-point home favorites, 9 points is where it's sitting now. It's definitely one of the better spots to objectively bet on Gurley. But as far as a cash game play, he's just not involved enough for me in both capacities of the run game and the pass game for me to feel really good about him. But, I mean, I'll definitely have him in some stacks of that game. Yeah, Keenum's throwing the ball a lot. I mean, Keenum, like I said, we don't know when Haskins comes in, and we know what Colt McCoy is, but we just don't know if he's going to be, because they've put up in the past 2 games, it's been all second half production for the Washington pass game and for McLaurin. So I mean, we just don't know if, like, you know, a rookie quarterback's going to be able to get himself out of those holes, you know, and be able to produce in that script, because typically garbage time is a myth. You know, quarterbacks play worse in garbage time, and you know, I had an article about this at Sharp Football in one of the early articles. And if you want to reach out and try, if you didn't read that, you know, reach out to me. It's in one of the early play calling articles. It's either the first or second article I did at Sharp Football over the summer, where it showed that, you know, chasing game script is a myth. So, I mean, I like I said, I have a little bit of worry when they do make the change a little bit. You thought Washington's going to come back? They were trying. I mean, they were getting there. They were trying to at least, you know, at least cover or get into the area of it. Let's see where we're at here. Preston is asking Dak or Rivers. Right now, I mean, it's hard to you know, fade Rivers, man, against the Dolphins. It's hard to fade Dak as well. I mean, I got him 4-5, just slight lean for Rivers, you know, just based on the matchup. But I do like Dak to continue to play well, even through, you know, his supposedly, you know, worst matchup of the year, just based on opponent. But the Saints have really struggled against the pass. They've given him some high-end production. Obviously, last week was more garbage time to Russell Wilson, but Deshaun Watson had 30 points against them week 1. Jared Goff had 19.1. I feel really good about him, but just a slight edge. If it's a one-quarterback league, man, I got to ask why you got both those guys. I mean, you shouldn't have both those guys. Either try to flip one to somebody that doesn't have a quarterback, or, you know, open up that roster spot. We don't be rostering multiple quarterbacks. You hate myself for saying this. Should I play Mariota over Mayfield? No, I mean, I don't think it's a terrible spot, you know, to at least talk yourself into Mariota. The way the Falcons have played, they lost Keanu O'Neal. He's playing indoors, like, you know, against the team that could have a little shootout potential. I do have Mayfield just a little bit higher, still a few spots higher. You know, the production downfield has still been there against the Ravens. They've kind of been a fugazi defense so far. They're giving up a lot of production, you know, through the air. Obviously, everyone's going to, you know, have production against Mahomes. But, you know, they allowed 350 passing yards the week before to Kyler Murray. They're giving up, you know, their third and, you know, 20-yard pass plays allowed. So I still just like the upside a little bit more. And I just, the differentiating point for me versus Mariota and a guy like Mayfield is just the personnel. So I can talk myself into the matchup being good for Mariota, but he's still throwing to this lead target is Delaney Walker and then Adam Humphries and Corey Davis. And whereas opposed to Baker Mayfield, still is like you're getting attachment to Odell Beckham, you know, and Jarvis Landry. So it's just one of those where I'm going to take on that personnel popping over just strictly playing the matchup. But I can see how you can get there. I can talk myself into the matchup for Mariota. It's just, like I said, the attachment to the pieces. Ben's got Kittle on bye. Who's the best tight end streaming this week? You added Dawson Knox. So here was where we are with tight end streaming, because I'm assuming Disley was picked up in your league, and it's bad. It's rough out in these streets. So I think you have to look at maybe Vernon Davis. Yeah, so we're at Vernon Davis, and maybe like if you want like a deeper dart, because now Tyler Higbee looks like he's going to play. So I'm going to amend that in the worksheet. Tyler Higbee looks like he's on track to play, so it's not going to be Gerald Everett. Maybe a guy like Sean Culkin for the Chargers. You just monitor. I wouldn't pick Sean Culkin up yet. I would monitor tomorrow and see if Mike Williams doesn't practice again. And if Mike Williams definitely doesn't practice, just take a flyer on Culkin. He ran 27 pass routes last week in that Miami matchup. And if Mike Williams is going to be out there, or even if he is, maybe you just take a shot on just getting a touchdown or some targets. But Vernon Davis, I guess, would be the probably the most viable streamer that's most likely on your waiver wire. Out of those options, or you just play Knox. I mean, definitely not. I mean, Knox had a higher target share the week before. He had that sensational play, man, where he just bullied two guys. But I mean, he's not a guy I really like chasing the points on against the Patriots. I don't hate Matt Collins for the showdown slate tonight, Scott. Obviously, Alshon being back, dampens that a little bit. And then, he strictly works in the boundaries. So, I mean, he's going to have Kevin King and Jair Alexander to kind of go up against. But, I mean, he's definitely the play I would have over Arcega-Whiteside. I think that, captain spot, if you're looking at it tonight, obviously I think chalk is going to be Devontae Adams and the captain, right? So, I mean, I think if you want to run back different captains that are non-quarterbacks, it's MVS because it's a direct pivot, and he directly hurts the Devontae Adams teams. Or you look at a guy like Miles Sanders or Zach Ertz in the captain spot. But I think MVS is the direct pivot that hurts those teams. Because we'll see Adams, I think, with the highest chalk ownership, and him being the captain spot the most. I think it's gonna be tough to win a tournament tonight with Devontae Adams. You might tie a bunch of other folks, but probably not gonna take one down with him in your captain spot. Wentz or Stafford? Ooh, this is a good one. I just want to make sure, because I am high on Stafford this week, but I think I have Wentz though. I have Wentz 10 and Stafford. You guys have asked some good ones where it's like literally a guy like where it's just a bubble question, like a 1v1 question. I think Wentz is more of a floor play though. I will say that. So I think Wentz's floor is higher because, like I said, he's gotten there the last 2 weeks by playing poorly. He's played poorly the last 2 weeks, and they've had guys injured, and he gets Alshon back tonight. But he's still gotten there for fantasy. He's still been a QB1. But I don't think he has like a top 6 outcome in his range of potential this week. I think he's more of a guy that's going to get you like a QB10 type of week and be that type of hit. Whereas Stafford has a lower floor, but has like the more he's got that matchup, that back and forth game against the Chiefs indoors. And he's a guy I would say he has a top 6 scoring outcome in his in his range of outcomes, but he also has like a QB 18 or lower play in his range outcomes. So it's just how you want to tolerate that type of risk between those guys. So I mean, those are good questions asked. I'm not always just going to default to the rankings. I at least want to lay you out, because rankings are just a linear list. I mean, they're not like a hard Bible or anything. It's literally in a bubble. Like, would I objectively, all things neutral, like what do I believe in, like this guy or that guy? So like once in his range of outcomes, I just feel better about his range of outcomes and being higher. But if I'm a team that I'm a dog in my matchup, or I just want to chase that upside period because that's how I play the quarterback position, if that's your flavor, then you make a play for that upside, and you play a guy that has that higher ceiling in his range of outcomes, but understand while you're playing that guy also that he has a lower floor in his range of outcomes as well, and what you're willing to take on, and you don't always just to follow the list. MVS or Diggs? I'm playing MVS, man, over Diggs. I got him. Like I said, I believe better in his floor. I mean, Diggs to me is like he's either going to hit or he's going to have another middling game. Like where MVS I think can have like a pretty solid game, as a floor, and then he's got the upside in that matchup. The things that the Eagles, the big games they've given up, the guys like McLaurin and Marvin Jones last week, those guys get types of targets that Valdez Scantling gets, those downfield shots, and it's not that Devontae Adams doesn't get those shots either. I mean, Devontae Adams is going to out target MVS, but I mean he's that vertical type of playmaker that those guys are. You're a little curious about Lamar Jackson ranked over Prescott this week. How'd you really go wrong either way? What drives that? It's literally the floor and ceiling of Lamar Jackson, him taking that step forward as a passer. He's never had a career game with lower than 15 fantasy points. He's the first quarterback to ever do that over the 10 games to start his career. Just that rushing upside is so high. And the Browns had no answer for him last year. With him running around. Obviously, they bring in a new defensive coordinator with, Wilkes, and, but the Browns are still banged up. It's just literally just the floor upside, and not that Prescott doesn't have a high floor upside either. It's just that I know Lamar's going to probably have, 6+ rushing points, right? Dak, if he doesn't have a rushing touchdown, will probably have 2 to 4 rushing points. But I don't think you go wrong either way. I mean, we're really splitting hairs of guys that have his top 5 plays. For that. Favorite cheap defense? I mean, on FanDuel right now, I mean, the Rams are completely mispriced. I really like the Rams a lot. Let me see, what else do we have here? But I really like the Rams a lot on FanDuel where they're priced. If you're not going to pay up for the Chargers and you want to free up that 900 there. On DK, let me get a quick look. I had a DK dummy set up, but it had the Chargers in it, so I want to give you some other plays there. The Rams are the defensive 5 there. You've got Bears, Vikings, can't play them in the main slate. Rolling down this list, the Panthers at 2,300 I think are interesting, just based on sack potential. But that's I mean, that's really where we're at. I mean, it's a lot of garbage at the bottom here this week. The Cowboys against Teddy Bridgewater at 3K on DK are really interesting. But I mean, again, that's if you want to free up that 800. That's where I would look, out of those teams defensively. Any chance the Rivers and the Chargers piss themselves again and don't cover spread? I mean, they're giving 15.5 points. They don't cover. I don't think it'll be like it'll be the shock of the world. But it would be a complete shock if they straight up lose to Miami. You said you couldn't help yourself and had to bet it. I mean, hey, I'm not going to take away from anyone's long play. Some use Chicago as a captain on a showdown. Oh, the Chicago D. Yeah, you can play play Ds on DK. Adam is going Aaron Jones. I thought he had an Aaron Jones question already. You're just running out all these Aaron Jones questions. Aaron Jones, A-Rob, or Diggs in half PPR. There, I would just in half PPR, I would just take the touches from Aaron Jones and hope he gets a touchdown. I'm not on any of those guys though. But in half PPR, I would just play the touch game. Who wins tonight? Foot to fire. I think I would say the Packers, but I would say the Eagles cover. I would say a 3-point game. I say 24-21, something in that area. I think that the 4 points are good. But I mean, I have a problem with the way Doug Peterson is calling games so far to start this year. The Packers are probably a little overvalued at 4, though. It should probably just be 3. I like James White, Matthew, for a couple of reasons, and a little bit we talked about on Sunday morning when we pivoted to Dorsett in a lot of lineups. So one, he had a good game against Buffalo last year, but it sets up for the Patriots just live in 11 personnel now. No James Devlin now, and Sony Michel needs that fullback. He needs that fullback to be productive, and he just hasn't been without him on the field. So I mean, it's a tougher match anyways against the Bills. I think that they're going to live in that dink and dunk. It's going to be Edelman and White and Burkhead. It really sets up for that game because they're going to be able to limit Josh Gordon on the boundaries and Dorsett on the boundaries. I think it's going to be an Edelman, White, Burkhead game. As long as it's full PPR, I hope that's where you only own James White as full PPR. But I kind of like James White a little bit this week. See if we get a couple more in here under the gun as we approach, 15 minutes, kind of where we've been. It's kind of slowed down every week. See if we can just get one more in. What are my expectations for Gallman this week? Good chalk or bad chalk and cash? I think he's better chalk on DK with the full PPR 4,600. I think you swallow him there. He's a complete tournament fade, like absolute tournament fade. Like, you can't play him at that ownership. Like he's. I mean, you could play him in some tournaments, but at that ownership, like why not just pivot all the way? Disley's the same way. I think Disley's a Disley in tournaments. Like you have to go elsewhere. Like he's got to be a fade. If you want to play him in cash, that's fine. But I think that he's, when you talk about his range of outcomes, Disley's by far no means like a home run. So I mean, he's a guy that I would look to, just fade at his ownership in tournaments. And Gallman the same way. If you're talking about Gallman, he's gonna be 30% owned. I'm going to come off that, especially when I know that he probably has a 9-point game in his range of outcomes. I don't think he's necessarily bad cash though, or bad chalk in cash, just because of what you can do with him. Being a cheap running back and the amount of touches, I think he's better chalk on DK than FanDuel with the full PPR though. Paul Richardson, a good pivot from F1 McLaren. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, he's got 2 touchdowns the past 2 weeks. He's got a good matchup that he's getting the target volume. So yeah, if you're gonna chase that game in a game stack or look to have a pivot, because McLaurin is projected to be, let me pull it up here, I had it up, the third highest owned wide receiver of the week on DK. It's a little lower on FanDuel. But the wide receiver 3 in DK in ownership, that's a big jump. So anytime you get that type of ownership with these mid-priced guys, you can look for pivots and look to make pivots to get your edge in tournament building. So, so I mean, as we approach 50 minutes, we'll be back Sunday. Pop in Sunday because we'll have more information, especially with a lot of these injuries, and we'll just have a firmer grasp. But as far as plays tonight, I mean, it was mostly a lot of Aaron Jones questions and MVS questions versus people, and a little bit of Miles Sanders. Obviously, I'm down on Aaron Jones in totality. I understand if you do, you have to play him for the touches. I get it, but I like a lot of pivots over him. It's a game where I think he needs a touchdown to be fantasy relevant. I don't like to play guys against the Eagles. The Eagles are just such a good run defense consistently. And I'm on MVS. I like MVS. I like the target volume he's got, and I like the matchup. So that's kind of where the game lays out tonight. But yeah, pop in Sunday. Again, we'll steer the conversation wherever you want, answer all the questions that you want to answer. And then good luck and showdown slate tonight. Hope everyone gets off to a really good, strong week 4.